We believe this is the fourth industrial revolution. The prior three have brought significant change and disruption and opportunity to our world. And to help us to try to unpick this, to help us to understand how to remove the hype, how to reduce the concerns and the fears, we've assembled a fantastic panel. And what I'd like to say is that we've got 250 people in this room. Apparently 650 people signed up to join this panel. So this is clearly the star of the show. So what I'd like to first of all is welcome this fantastic set of panelists, and then we have a bit of housekeeping to talk about, and then we're going to get into a conversation. So first of all, to my right is Nikolaos Alavidze, Deputy Minister for the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia. Welcome. Currently supervising investment policy, ICTs and R&I. Got 19 years of high-level experience in the private sector, mainly in corporate banking and consulting. Welcome and thanks for hosting a fantastic forum. And to my left is Armen Abroyan, Deputy Minister of the High-Tech Industry of the Republic of Armenia. He's got extensive skills and experience in working with innovation centres and laboratories, project management and digitalisation. And you were a programmer prior to joining the government. So welcome very much, Mr. Abroyan. Thank you. And next to my right is Laszlo György. He's the Secretary of State for Economic Strategy and Regulation from Hungary. And your claim to fame is you're a PhD, Associate Professor at John van Neumann University. And until your appointment as Secretary of State, you served as Chief Economist at the largest think tank in Hungary, working together with the Prime Minister and the Economic Government. Welcome. Thank you very much. To my left here, a good friend of mine, Irakli Baridze, who's head Centre for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics at the United Nations in UNICRI. Irakli has more than 20 years' experience in leading multilateral negotiations, developing stakeholder engagement programs at an international level. And I understand that since 2014, you've initiated and managed the first UN program on AI and robotics, and the recipient of recognition on the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize to the OPCW in 2013. And to my far right, your far left here is Marco Mahn. Marco is the Senior Partner for Solution Professional Data and AI for Microsoft across the CEE. I think on the lift and the way down, you say you shuttle between 24 countries on a regular basis. And you've worked with multiple governments across the region, applying AI to make governments more efficient and more effective. So welcome aboard, Marco. And last but by no means least, to my left here is Ms. Nino Enukidze, Rector for Professor and Business at the Technology University with 10 years' experience working in the education sector. And the most exciting thing, I think, since 2016, involved in the process of launching Silicon Valley Tbilisi, launched the Global Startup Foundation, and a founding member of AI Georgia Business Association. Nino, welcome aboard. Thank you for joining us. Now, we have a slightly compressed timetable, so we're going to slightly reduce our opening statements maybe to 3 or 4 minutes to get us going, and then get into a conversation. Everybody happy with that. So, to start things off, Nikolaos, if we could start with you. What are the main obstacles that we need to overcome to ensure that countries in this region are able to fully capitalise on the opportunities offered by this AI revolution?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for everybody who's here. We've been a bit late because we're trying to teach our data, and we were lost in this deep learning process. We went too deep, so for that. But anyway, coming back for that, and the AI, as you say, and we know, and artificial intelligence, etc. It has become a really big issue, as we say, but it is not really new, actually. It's minimum 60 years old once the first computers have been delivered, and then like 25 years ago, the World Wide Web just kicked off, etc. We've seen, and humanity faced a new challenge, new path of its evolutionary process. In the beginning it was like revolution, but now we are on the path of the evolution, and we use only every day AI in our smartphones, or our smartwatches, or on in any case, in banking, and in real life. And of course, it is still becoming as a challenge when you say at the big word like AI and what that's going to do, etc. And well,
ასე შემდეგ
what it's going to change.
რას შეცვლის ბევრს სulis ეს გახლავთ ევოლუცია
Because our life is a one-time chance as a humans.
ერთხელ მოცემული შანსი
Be more efficient, be more effective in our living. AI is one of the tools from many different tools. Because the first revolution happened, which you mentioned now, we are before zero, before industrial revolution. First revolution happened many years ago. If we go up to with the scholars like some say that it was happened like more than 9,000. Humans have to utilize the tools which are now very, very outdated. These were the AI of that time, but many thousand years ago, etc. And it's come now. And for us, how, coming back to the question, this is new tool to be more effective as well. The coin has the two sides. It is, of course, it has a very, very high degree of uncertainty, avoidance, because we do not know what is it. Something, everybody's still moving like Terminator, or taking over the humans. Side, it's a big governmental bodies, on political level, on the regulatory level, because once again, it is very, very positive thing. But we've seen very positive things like tools being used for not positive results, and we've seen some very, very bad outcomes from very positive and lovely, especially in crime, especially in fraud, etc. When we people try to teach our machines to be smart, to do the business, what to substitute the routine work from us, it's kind of a result we have to there's a challenge. In this region, particularly, we are on a different path of our development. Okay, this region is taking over from some style, taking over from we had some more hard past, let's say so. And the Western world is more advanced. Okay, on the AI side, there are some big players, big industries. The bigger players on this moment who are like US, EU, and China. They have some different drives. US drive is totally driven on the private sector view. The EU is driven more on the regulatory side, and China has a very clear policy to be leaders in AI in 2030. Compared with those big players, our region is not as rich, is not as advanced as they are, but we are not giving up. So we also need to go up, and we are also try to be on the pace, and of course to get the best experience and the best practices from these players. And it, of course, I'm very sure that further developing AI, which is based on the collection and grading all these big data, what we have generated, would also assist our region, and of course our countries, to be more productive for common use and common benefits for the global. Because we are small countries, small nations, but we say we are domestic partners, but for the global world. Because we are thinking, try to think locally, but acting globally. And this is our chance to be more productive on this side. So, summing up, I'm very optimistic on this side, and of course we have a very close targets from the government side. Government is trying to support this direction. JITA, for example, where we have some few very successful startups on this side. We have our policy. We are trying to adopt the general action plan on this side. We are very positive, and I'm very confident that AI is the next step on our usual daily life.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Just before I go to you, Armin, you'll notice up on the screens you'll see a poll on. Thank you. Can you see this? Do we need harmonized worldwide regulations and standards in the age of AI? You've got three choices to make. Current international regulations and standards are sufficient, or or a completely new approach is needed. So if you could go to Slido, the event code is AISRS, and if you could please vote. About 5-10 minutes before the end of this session, we'll see what everybody thinks. So if we could have a big response, that would be terrific. Thank you for your opening remarks. Armin, if you could move on to your area. We discussed as well previously the impact on people, the impact on the world of work, the impact on the jobs of the future. If you could maybe spend 5 minutes opening your remarks on this area.
Thank you. This great opportunity inviting me here. And first of all, I think this is a big question, understanding what AI really is today and how it's going to evolve. So we can answer these questions, because when it's going to move and what kind of job it can replace. And currently, I think what I'm just noticing frequently having discussions about AI, I think we don't really understand AI very well. And currently we need to admit that AI is kind of more, we say AI, but it's in the last 10 years, it's mostly machine learning that is involved, deep learning, neural networks, which actually tries to mimic human behavior, or tries to learn some data on some basic patterns or some complex patterns, but it's very narrow focused, very narrow, it solves very narrow tasks. And having this in mind, we can understand that AI is going to do more of very specialized work, very repetitive, manual type of work that human also can do. But AI is there, we can use AI to do that boring work for us, and also a big amount of data work that human can practically handle that much data work. But will it evolve to a level that can completely replace a person, a human? I think this is a big question, and I believe there is no clear answer for that for now. I'm talking about the next couple of decades or 50 years even. But I think the AI has many other problems that the science of AI that we need to solve to evolve to a level that actually it can replace human. And also, there is one important factor, it is the robotics that also needs to grow with the AI, because if we think that AI is going to replace a human, then it should also replace a human body. Because being a smart subject, human, it can also do some work with its body. Then the jobs that we can do, not necessarily very smart, artificial intelligence can replace us from that, because we also use our body, and we have very almost perfect. So I think in this term, we need to think more about what kind of work it can do, and I'm getting into that actually. And there is other question I wanted to also cover. We are in computer area for more than decades. But still, we couldn't actually use all the power of the computers. So it's also going to happen with the AI. If AI is there, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to fully use the AI. It's kind of more organizational work, how we can organize these tools that we have. We know that this, for example, in government, there is digitalization of government, paperless solutions and so on, but still, not all the governments, they use fully digital government, right? Some of, even very well-developed countries, they don't have this tool. So what I'm trying to say that even if the AI is there, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be everywhere in every sphere. And just to recap, I want to give some examples what kind of work is actually going to be replaced opinion, by the AI is mostly like mechanical, repetitive, manual work that it can do like mechanically for us, being more smarter than regular computer programs, of course, that regular programs can do, but still the jobs that we have are going to stay there, like the nurse, doctors, archaeologists, engineers, software engineers, AI engineers, of course. Some part of this work is going to be replaced by the AI, but it's going to be like the part that we want to delegate to AI. But the creative work is going to stay there, and I think the parents should pursue and convince their children to do more creative work, to learn, to educate, get better educated, so they can do the actual creative, more creative work. Thank you.
Thank you. Laszlo, from a national perspective, you've got this tremendous upside of driving economic growth. You've got the ability to streamline and harmonise society, and then you're trying to wrestle with all these regulations and concerns and risks associated with it. How are you approaching it in Hungary at the moment?
Thank you very much for inviting me here. The answers to your question is probably can be summarized in one point, and if we just decompose it. Strategic goal is to create a market where there is no market, and if the market would emerge in its organic way or natural way, then monopolies would emerge. Imagine that when Apple, Google, and all these tech companies grew up from the garages from Nowhere in California, then they were somehow against the kind of monopole power of the government, and now they became the monopolists of our current era. So our job is to, if we believe in market economy and if we believe in the means of market economy, that competition can create welfare for us, then we have to create an institution for this new market, and through this we can foster the spread, the dissemination of artificial intelligence. And how to create this market, that is the question, that is a real question for a policymaker, and we have to focus on 3+1 areas. First, we have to create an AI ecosystem to foster AI development. That is why Hungary established just a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, an AI coalition from the members of the academia, from members of business, and we also fostered small and medium-sized enterprises to join this AI coalition to understand what it's all about. We have now more than 200 companies and universities in this AI coalition, and this AI coalition will create an AI strategy by the end of this year. Their role is to create an excellence center where AI basic research, applied research, AI development and higher education can take place, and they actually have to tell what kind of investments we have to put in AI, just in order to be able to spread the advantages of AI. And also these partners are contributing with their fees, so we believe that there will be enough money. The government will put a lot of money into AI basic research and applied research as well. The second thing that we have to do is the framing, the exploitation of the data capital. So we have to create a kind of a data management. For this reason, we are establishing National Data Agency, in Hungary. We have a social contribution system which is very unique around the world. I don't know whether you have it in Georgia, that all the members of the society belong to one social security system, so we can monitor their health data in one big system. So it's a comprehensive system. But how to use this data, how to use it on a way that it's anonymous, how to use it that the owners of the data are also benefiting from from others using their data. So this is very important. So these rules are set now in Hungary. It's under setting in Hungary. The third thing that we are focusing on is communication and dissemination. How to spread the knowledge. How to spread the knowledge. And for this reason, we joined the so-called AI challenge that stems from the Scandinavian countries, that you have to reach with the e-learning materials or some education materials 1% of your society, and somehow with AI-related topics, either an exhibition or a TV show or a TV quiz, 10% of your society. So our target for 2020 is to reach 1% of our society through online AI courses and a permanent AI exhibition, and 10% through TV shows and an AI video competition. So we believe that it is very important to disseminate the knowledge that is created and to make it more friendly to the people of the country. We also created a web page, MI in the practice. MI is artificial intelligence in Hungarian, mesterséges intelligencia, where you can, in this web page, you can see concrete examples how AI works in everyday life. And we also create an AI map in Hungary, and the AI map is to identify all the members of the AI community. And the last thing which we have to do is to close the digital or the AI gap, because there will be people who are not educated very well. They will exit the employment market and will not be able to get back. But to give you some hope, John Maynard Keynes, one of the greatest economists of the 20th century, said in the 1930s that his grandchildren will only work 15 hours a week because of technological development. Well, I could be John Maynard Keynes' grandson, and I'm still working that much a day, so there's a huge difference.
Thank you very much, Laszlo, very interesting. Irakli, you and I have worked together quite a lot on what we call the AI for Good agenda, so there's now remarkable opportunity to start harnessing artificial intelligence, to start accelerating progress towards the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. Amazing things happening now at a UN level, and in your role, maybe if you could just spend 5 minutes setting out how international organizations are getting together around this agenda.
Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you. First of all, I would like to say how excited I am to be in Tbilisi, to be in Georgia, to see in my hometown having AI discussions already happening, to see Deputy Minister announcing how much Georgian government is interested in developing national agenda on artificial intelligence to use for its economy, for its prosperity, to see Georgia becoming real hub for these technologies in this region, and to see so many experts coming here, because at the moment what we're having in the world is that we have countries who are adopting national strategies, countries who are investing in different sectors, and I would like to see, and I'm really happy to see Georgia becoming part of that big movement where this type of accelerated progress is happening. So thank you very much for inviting, and I'll be very happy to assist in that. I'm happy to hear that there are announcements of establishing business AI councils and different startups and different governmental programs in that sense in Georgia. That's just a little bit about these developments. Now, let's go back to the United Nations. So at the UN, we started discussions on AI, very early discussions back in 2014, when I had an honor to actually chair a panel and initiate programs at the General Assembly, where we sort of at early stage introduced the agenda. And later on, things have progressed at the UN with the arrival of the new Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, who at his first statement announced that AI is a game changer, which has the potential to turbocharge the progress towards sustainable development goals. And it was just not the words, it was the actions, where UN was encouraged to do a lot more than it may have been doing before. So we have created something called AI for Good Summits. And my center was one of the first partners of these summits back in 2017 when we launched it. You were there as well. And that's when we started to see how AI can support the development of the fulfillment of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These are the 17 very ambitious goals. Obviously, AI is not going to solve all the problems, but AI has certainly the potential to contribute toward that. We're talking about goals of no poverty, clean water, climate change, and other things. At the same time, UN Secretary General also underlined that AI is an epochal challenge, and alongside with the climate change. So he identified two epochal challenges, one being a climate change, and the other is the challenge introduced by the development of new technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, or biotech. Therefore, what is our agenda at the AI for Good Summit is to see what are the applications which can support this fulfillment of the UN SDGs, so-called, how we can introduce the private sector, academia, governments, and other sort of stakeholder cooperation for creating new programs which can support this process, but at the same time to see what are the threats and what are those challenges what we have and how to mitigate those threats and challenges. And that's been sort of on the agenda of many different UN agencies. Now, at this moment in 2019, most of the UN agencies have identified either their digital advisor or some innovation accelerators and other things which are working together with the different centers as well. Our center has been open already since 2017. Now AI has become a really big issue, therefore we need to focus on some sectoral aspects of it as well. So what we are working on is that we are working on issues related to the crime prevention, criminal justice, rule of law, and human rights issues associated to that. And I can actually introduce later on some of the concepts what we are working on or cooperations what we are having. But what is really sort of a core, at the core of the UN approach is to how to maximize the benefits of this technology, how to make sure that this is benefiting everyone in the world and nobody's left behind, and we don't have these digital divides which we might be threatened if selected few will only develop this technology and others will, and billions of people will not participate in this digital revolution and getting progress, that they're getting sort of benefits out of that. And at the same time to minimize the risks which are associated to it.
Fantastic, what a great mission. Thank you, Irakli. And really, what more can I say about Microsoft, one of the key players in this AI revolution? Marco, I was keen to build upon what Armen was saying there about the impact on people, the impact on the world of work. This is the one that always comes up in discussions. Some analysis that we conducted at PwC last year suggested that by the mid-2030s, up to 30% of existing jobs could become susceptible to automation by AI. On the other side, though, if we see this tremendous economic boost start to come through, it brings with it, we believe, an increase in labour demand and a reassembly of those different tasks that make up whole jobs. And overall, we're saying if we get policy right at government level, if we get adaptations to the education system correct, if we can refocus people upon more of a lifelong learning agenda, we can net off the jobs we lose with jobs we create. Where do you sit on this agenda around jobs of the future and the workforce we need in the future?
Thank you, Rob. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. And it's a good question, and it's something I'm discussing very often with governments I work with around the territory. I just earlier, when we were preparing for the panel, I gave an example of what we did recently with Microsoft. We trained a machine learning algorithm to paint a Rembrandt-like picture. So what we did is we scanned multiple Rembrandt pictures, and by doing this, we trained the model to imitate the technique that Rembrandt used, and his technique were really complex. And the end result was surprising. So the picture, the painting that the system produced was presented to some of the top experts in the field of modern and classical arts, and they were basically confused from which era was this painting brought. And when we told them that this was designed by an AI algorithm, they were surprised. But the key takeaway here is, in order to achieve this great and phenomenal result, human input was needed. So basically, we built this by infusing the technique and the genius that was Rembrandt. And I think this is something we have to keep in mind. Even though the change is imminent, and basically this is happening throughout history, with every industrial revolution there were changes, and people were a bit reserved toward adoption of new technologies, new principles, new business models. It's happening today as well with AI. But on the other hand, the human touch will always be needed. needed. And AI is not something that will replace us, but it will complement us. So what's happening is AI will empower us to achieve more. It will help us to delegate some of the routine tasks that are currently a burden to the machine learning algorithms so that we can focus on the productivity and creativity. At the end of the day, productivity and creativity is something that's our trait that cannot be replaced by a machine of any kind. So this is something we're striving for. On the other hand, at Microsoft, we are firm believers that we should include everyone. So we want to make sure that AI is an ubiquitous technology that is democratized across the field. So regardless of the country, of the, let's say, sector, is it a commercial or a public sector, AI should be available to everybody to take use of. And just yesterday, I had the privilege to participate at a panel at the startup event in your technology park, and it's always fascinating to see what technology enables. So what new ideas are emerging, what new business concepts. And I think this is something we have to strive for. And the key underlying foundation is that we make it transparent and that we regulate it properly.
Thank you, Marco. And last but by no means least, behind the flower somewhere, I can see you, Nino. Clearly, in order to prepare a society that's fit for the future, that's got the right skills in abundance to match the new jobs that could be created, whether it's Rembrandt artists or what, I don't know, we'll have to see, won't we? What's higher education doing? What are you doing in your work to ensure that you're working with the right bodies in government and other parts of civil society to get us fit for the future?
Thank you, Rob. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and to be part of this discussion because it's very important for our country, but not only. Let's start from the idea that AI stands to fundamentally transform society and economy and the way we live, the way we work and do things in our everyday life. AI has this transformational force to boost productivity in multiple industries, if not in every industry in the world. So while it's so beneficial for, let's say, humankind, it's also bringing a number of risks and challenges, and we have to discuss it even within higher education institutions or outside, but it's something we have to discuss. And I like the fact that in 2017, Canada has first delivered the first national AI strategy, and then numbers of countries followed, and I'd love to see Georgia being part of this the process, because it's very important for every country to have a very clear vision of what AI might bring to its industries, and how even universities or higher education institutions can contribute towards this process. So even though I truly believe that these national strategies will differ from each other, I'm sure that there will be some key dimensions which has to be the same in every strategy, and also I think that higher education institutions and the education sector itself can contribute towards these dimensions. And these dimensions are research, it's job displacement issues, and reskilling workforce, because it's something we have to think about, and universities are the right direction to look at. We know statistics that, well, it's an estimation, it's a forecast that by 2030 there will be more than 800 million jobs displaced by artificial intelligence. So what we can do if we are, I'm talking from universities' perspective, what we can do is to look at lifelong learning approaches and how can we reskill them, and what tools can we use to be involved in this process. So one more dimension and one more issue which should be definitely covered by the national strategy, it's ethical issues and some laws and regulations regarding data privacy or whatever it is. It's about, let's say, open ecosystems, because we've seen different ecosystems supporting research or application AI in different industries. And I think that if we will be open and if we share our experience with each other within countries, if we share our best practices, it will give both parties the best result. And let's say last but not least is that choosing the most important, not important, but let's say the strategic industries within the countries and starting investing there is an important thing to do. And this is the case which, for example, India has done. They have chosen the most strategically important industry. It was agriculture, and they started to invest in AI applications development in agriculture, and successful. It was very successful. So again, I'm a big supporter of this strategy, national strategy to be started developing in Georgia. I'm very happy to say, to know that Georgia's Ministry of Education has the new initiative of integrating AI applications into education process in schools, at universities, and Microsoft is supporting this initiative, and it's a really good start, but we should move forward within the next few years, and I think that this discussion will help us a lot to have the more clear vision of where we go and what we do.
Thank you very much, Nina. So we've heard quite a lot there, haven't we, so far? It's such a multi-dimensional topic, and one of the things I can see that is going to be required is this is going to require collaboration on a scale never seen before between government, between the private sector, between education institutions, civil society, charities and beyond. You're obviously private sector background previously and have moved into government recently. How do you ensure that you get people to collaborate here, not to look after their own interests, but to participate in a broader agenda, either nationally or even internationally?
Well, thank you. It's a very, very good question, actually, Rob. And the reason is that we can empower them, we can force everybody to collaborate. This is the one way can we secure this one, but of course it is not the case. First of all, it's very important to give a very, very clear communication, because as I said, and as the colleagues also agreed, this is the part of the past of our just ordinary life. We are just trying to use our one-time chance of our life to be more efficient. And coming back to 1800s, while these steam engines have been established, and there was a lot of many panic from the humans. No, the machines are taking over humans, etc., etc. And then in early 60s of 20th century, where Isaac Asimov created this robotics and robots, and they started in 30s, and even Jules Verne, when he was writing about this science fiction, etc., everybody was so okay. People, we are flying, we are making some very, let's say, ridiculous things for the perspective of 100 or even 50 years ago. Now, what we have to do just to deliver and to secure this good cooperation, because we have a very, very good examples of private and public cooperations, we have some very good results, and the driver, in every case, there is a very, very clear communication. And this is very, very good that my colleague and our good friend, he's from UN, and UN is paying so much big attention on this one, because it has a big mandate. This is the United Nations organization. They are dealing with a lot of many nations, and they are dealing with very many cultures, very, very diverse and very, 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 very different. But this is unique one, because we need to have this one single and simple approach. We need to be more efficient and effective. How can we do it? We have accumulated huge data. We're saying that we have a big data which analyzed, and for example, Google analyzes, I don't know, more than 35 million requests per day, etc. It makes tremendous numbers. Coming back again to the Douglas Adams, they invented the engine which was working on improbability drive. We are here on the improbability drive, yes, and once again, this is the motivation that it should be very clearly communicated, and everybody understands that we need to be more productive, more ethical, and of course we might face the challenges which are attributed to this progress, and any part of our history and progress, there's some challenges, and we have to face it, because we cannot ignore it. We have to accept it, we have to organize ourselves and be more productive using with these tools, with this accumulated data, which is now very, very much easily available. We just need to be more cooperative.
Thank you. And Armin, there's an issue here, isn't there, about getting the right incentives in place to get the government to stimulate investment, to get different players in the public and private sector to cooperate.
And embedding in the economy. And just to share our experience, we established an advisory platform with the private sector, where we meet regularly and discuss some topics. And one of the topics is high-tech industry, of course, and AI including the AI. So this helps to be in touch regular based with the private sector and learn the new stuff is happening and also learn about their problems. And regarding the funding and providing the incentives, well, of course, if you fund anything, it will start to grow. It depends on how efficient we use. But I think we also acknowledge that it's very important just to do two main stuff. Is just make sure that we have good educated talents and we have the workforce, that we have the talents that we feel in the market, and we are going to help our private sector to also to sell their products, to go into global markets, to sell their ideas, and also find some help with funding to actually realize their ideas. So if you think it becomes two very simple, two main aspects, just provide the people and then help to sell their products, and it will start grow on its own.
Thank you, Armin. Absolutely. One of the things that Nino was saying about the adaptations to higher education that's required, they're quite profound wholesale changes. One of the things that's often discussed in some of my conversations with governments and civil society more broadly is, can governments move with sufficient pace to keep up with the speed at which the Microsofts and other companies of the world are advancing this technology? Can you move with enough speed to adapt public policy and regulation to ensure that your society isn't being left behind in this tech revolution?
You're reading my mind, because I wanted to reflect back to Nino and to
AI.
Marco.
Yeah, exactly.
It's AI or it's maybe it's some natural intelligence that you have. Because AI, we consider more and more often we refer to AI not as artificial intelligence, but as augmented intelligence, something that complements us or augments us. And this is very important, but we have the economic policies has a very, very important task here, and this is to educate people and to understand what are the good practices with which you can educate people. And this is very difficult to keep pace with, because you cannot be faster in this technology revolution that we are having now. Previous technology revolutions could be led by governments, by economic policies, by creating the network of roads and rails and whatever. But now the technology revolution is coming from the business, from Microsoft and such kind of companies. So what we do in Hungary, we have another unique feature, that we have a unified information management system for vocational and adult education and for the universities. From this point of view, we can connect on a big databases all the education data with the tax authorities' data. And from this point on, we know that which kind of training, which curriculum is worth for the market players. And even intra-company trainings we can monitor, and we are not interested in the details until we see that there is something happening. If a training is useful, we can measure it through the tax authority data. We can tell if the wages are increasing in that position, if the stability of that position is better than the average or the reference group, and if the position of the employee deployed is changing. So this system makes it possible to monitor the best training options and then finance those trainings, which are really useful. Finance the training programs and finance those who are participating in these programs. That is how we can flexibly adapt to the revolutionary change in technology.
More iterative, agile approach to training that you can move quickly, change direction quickly, basically. Yeah.
Exactly. Very good.
Thank you. Irakli, we've heard some amazing opportunities discussed today, whether it's climate change, healthcare. There's amazing things happening around diagnosing disease, discovering new drug compounds, helping to make our energy systems more efficient. Great. All this stuff is there to help us make us happier and healthier, etc. There's often stories out now about more of the downside risk of AI, whether it's in advancing discrimination, human rights impact, whole issue around increase in bias, for example, and there's also issues now around security, privacy, and a whole host of other factors. Could you just maybe speak to some of the work you're doing in this field as well?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Obviously, AI has a tremendous opportunities and tremendous potential to help us all live healthier, longer, and prosperous lives. But at the same time, we should never sort of count it out. What are the immediate, midterm, or long-term threats associated with this technology? And one of the most sort of immediate threats that we have right now, apart from displacement of the jobs, because we see fantastic programs on the lifelong learning, education programs, investments in different type of fields, what we have immediately is that how this technology can be used for malicious purposes. What we're talking about here right now is that how this could be used for the crime or for terrorism as well. And we are categorizing it in three different fields. We're talking about digital crimes. So at the moment we have cyber crimes, which is a big topic and it's on everybody's agenda. But once we put the cyber crime, sort of cyber criminality on the AI-driven applications, we're multiplying the issue by millions. So what we're talking about is a program which never gets tired, works 24 hours, will try to find the loopholes, every single one of them, to penetrate the systems. And that makes the situation much worse. Second level of category of the crime is physical crimes. Here we're talking about a combination of AIs with robotics, like, for example, ground robotic vehicles or drones, or combination of drones, AI, and explosives or weapons of mass destruction. And here the situation becomes really dangerous, because what we imagine a drone with the face recognition technology assigned to do a targeted killing or the mass killing of every single Georgian, for example, and identifying Georgians and start killing it indiscriminately. So that's what we have very serious problem with. And the third category is the political crime, so AI being used for manipulating political processes. And over there are many different issues. Today we discuss fake news, we discuss manipulated news, but once you take the AI and manipulate the, for example, videos and the voice at the same time, so-called deepfakes, which our center is deeply involved in, and then identifying the threats, also detection technologies. Here, this is extremely serious issue. For example, as a joke, with our limited resources, data, and possibilities at the moment, it's very easy to make your video as a Rockma Cargo with your voice, with your face features, who would claim that Georgia just beat England in the Rugby World Cup final. You will be a hero in Georgia, but you may not be a hero.
I didn't see that game.
Back home. Right, but you get the point, right? So what we are doing about it is that we created a platform together with Interpol, and we're bringing the law enforcement agencies all around the world, and we're trying to share the experience and launch the specific programs, how to detect some of these occurrences, how to ensure that malicious use of AI is mitigated. Right? And then there are many other sort of issues which we are involved in at the same time. And one more thing to add, sorry that I'm sort of running out of time here, but another issue is that how law enforcement will be using AI and how it is so important to ensure that human rights issues, ethical issues are taken into consideration, that we are not having police states, we are not having abuse of the surveillance technologies, face recognition technologies, or other things as well.
Thank you. I mean, building upon that, Marco, I mean, clearly this has been a huge focus of Microsoft in the last 2 years in particular, looking at how do you avoid malicious actors, using AI for purposes, putting ethical principles in place. How do you give confidence to your customers in the ecosystem that these sort of issues that I've actually was talking about are uppermost in your
თქვენ რა
thoughts?
სიტყოდით თქვენ იმ საკითხებთან დაკავშირებით, რომელიც წინა მოხსენებმა აღნიშნა. ხელოვნური ინტელექტი შეიძლება იყოს გამოყენებული ისე, რომ მან შეიძლება გამოიწვიოს ზიანი, ან შეიძლება პირიქით ზიანი შეამციროს. მაგალითად, ბელგიაში ჩვენს პარტნიორებთან ერთად ჩვენ შევძელით, რომ დაგვედგინა ყველა ის მცდელობა, რომელიც უკავშირდებოდა გადასახადების თავიდან არიდებას და ფაქტობრივად ამ შემთხვევაში 1 მილიარდზე მეტი ევროს თანხის დაზოგვა მოხდა. ამ შემთხვევაში ხელოვნური ინტელექტს გააჩნია კარგის და ცუდის კეთების უნარის და თავარია შენ როგორ გამოიყენებ.
I'm doing several multiple projects with AI around the multi-country region that I'm responsible for. And before I start any project, I have to go through a committee that's an internal authority within Microsoft consisted of regulators, auditors, and lawyers that have to approve each project I want to engage in if it's compliant and it doesn't harm or affect the people that will be using it. So for instance, I'm doing a big project right now in Estonia for the judicial system. We want to predict the duration of each trial with the aim that the system will automatically appoint each next trial to appropriate court to reduce the workflows and the duration of the trial. And before I was able to start this project, we had to go through a series of questionnaires and we had to make sure that we're not impacting. So this is one thing. The other thing we're doing, in general, when cybercrime is concerned, we have a so-called digital crimes unit. It's a team of specialists sitting in Redmond that are detecting all possible anomalies happening on the web. And we are responding proactively instead of reactively to those threats. So what we can do is we leverage AI to detect possible threats. And if we detect something happening, let's say in Asia, by the time a new business day is starting in America, we are already embedding all necessary measures and processes to the business operations for the customers in the US. So this is what we're doing in this regard.
Very interesting. A lot of talk is about the bad rep that AI gets. AI can lead to bad outcomes. AI has done this. And AI is not good or bad. I mean, it's just about the humans operating and building and programming and engineering it, isn't it?
Exactly, and we've been using Douglas Adams a lot today during the discussion. The main motto is don't panic. Look, it's a new technology, we're bringing it, and as everything, it will be used by humans. And as you said, it depends how we use it. At the end, all the models that we are introducing are only as good as the people that were modeling it and building it. So this is a key takeaway, I think. And here, I think, you said the question at the beginning, I hope we will see some responses from the public. It depends how we will set the institutional framework on a global level, how to regulate the usage of artificial intelligence. This is something that we have to work closely, because what I see right now, 24 countries I operate in, each and every one of them has their own view and take on how to use AI. Even though I work with a lot of countries in the EU, regardless of the EU framework, a lot of countries are saying, well, we know what the EU guidance is, but locally we still see that we will apply only portions of the AI for a particular business. So this is something that we have to address and make it a universal appeal to all the entities, that we have to make a common ground on how to use it and utilize it.
Of pivotal importance is how that culture is embedded into the practitioners in the future, Nina, isn't it? How do you move that into the curricula so that these engineers, data scientists, people empowered to build this technology understand the ethical implications, the unintended consequences of their work? Talk me through how you do this.
Is AI good or bad? How dangerous it is? I think it's not bad to discuss it because it's much better to overestimate things in the beginning than at the end to think that we have underestimated something. But still, how can we use AI in the education process? Well, there are a number of AI applications already existing here for education system, and it starts from making some administrative functions up to some academic procedures, and AI can definitely start monitoring students' attendance at universities. It's a simple operation, but also what AI can do is to deliver, let's say, some educational toolkit for the student, but most importantly, what AI in education would do, and it's very important also if we discuss the issues regarding job displacement and reskilling the workforce. AI does two things. First of all, it's very let's say student-oriented approach to the learning. It's hyper-personalization of the system itself. So there are no two students in the world who have exactly the same demands towards education, studying needs, and so on. So what AI does is that it makes a unique educational experience to students, and it's very important. And even if we say that we will have to reskill workforce for the future and prepare them for job displacement, let's ask ourselves the questions: how do we do this? And is the approach which universities or schools are using for hundreds of years appropriate for this? Saying like classroom with 20 students or 30 students, teacher teaching them and then testing them about facts and about their memory mostly, and it's not very much focused on individual students' needs. So this is what AI is changing, and I truly believe that this is the future of education. So, second thing what AI does, it's inclusivity, and inclusive education is something which higher education institutions and the education sector in the world is facing. And we all know that people coming from high-income families receive much better education in the world than people from low-income families, and this is also a challenge which can be improved with AI applications integrated in the education system. So because of this, the initiative which Ministry has announced like months ago is a great thing to do, to start with, because me myself, I represent one university, but if every university representatives will agree that this is the right direction, I think that we will receive great results.
Thank you, Nina. Okay, I think it's time to have a look at this poll. If everybody at the back could help us with this. Let's see how you all voted. Democracy in action. 0 votes, I think, by the looks of it. Here we go. Here we go. Right. We're going to put it on the screen here as well. Okay, so in answer to this question about the need for worldwide regulations and standards, a huge 81% suggests that completely new approach is needed. That's bold. In second place with 11%, every country meeting their own standards and regs. And finally, current international regulations are sufficient. So it's quite an overriding winner. Maybe just in the last few minutes, if you could just limit it to 1 minute to speak to that. And a little question at the end as well, to parents in the audience, what job should you tell them to get their kids into?
It's a very hard question, but thank you very much. Just addressing to those 8% of the who are very happy with the current regulations. Could anybody state any regulation now which works for this AI? I don't know. So I'm in favor of the completely new approaches needed, because we are on a new path. Okay, we said that it is not so much new. I said it, and I think you all agree. But once again, I would cite the Asimov in this case again. Don't prevent your moral principles to prevent you making the right things. This is the case where we should just go beyond our perceptions of the robots who come and overtake us. we need to think about new regulations, we need to think about and evaluate how and where which field will work, because agriculture is one of the major fields which is already AI is working very good. In India they had very good success cases, Nino mentioned it, and they have demonstrated that these can work, even very classical and very unusual fields from AI perspective can be worked out. And that we need to have that very clear approach on this side. And I'm in favor of to have a new approach. I kind of share the EU approach to this process to be moderately fast on this side and to have the analyze data. Because we have collected a lot of main data, as we said, still we need to be more cautious on this side.
So I'd suggest that the answer to my second question is
and for your second question, it's very, if you look at like 30 years back, again, they have a very new professions. Maybe for coding, maybe for modern new disciplines to work upon, but to be very independent and free.
Yeah, well,
keep it quite short, fortunately, for the
well, I compare AI with new, I say AI is a new age power. Like, it's very similar to nuclear power that we are going to use, and that's why we also think that it can be dangerous, as nuclear power can be dangerous. So regulations, I think, are, and harmonizing regulations are very important, because some countries or terrorism, they can use the AI against humanity. So I think this is a very real threat, and we need to make sure that all the countries, all the nations are actually harvesting this power, and also it is being used for only good purposes.
jobs of the future, what you suggest would be in the ascendancy?
Well, AI engineer.
AI engineer, great.
Yeah, I would have voted for option B, every but it's not contradictory. I mean, the first and the second answer. I would say a completely new approach is needed in every country. So that would be my answer, because I think there should be a competition, and the competition is good. If we are creating an AI coalition, Hungary, Czech Republic creates its own AI coalition, and we are competing in creating an environment where we can attract and create high value-added jobs for the welfare of our people. So, a completely new approach. I think we have to go back to the origins. So why we are doing it? To live better, to have a better life for our people. So in this way, we don't need a completely new approach. We have to go back to the most important virtues, values that we ever enjoyed in our lives. And answer the question as well, what would be the future job? I believe Renaissance people who are lexically also very well educated, who can solve problems and cooperate with others, there will be that will be the future job.
Okay, a real spread of opinion here. Just a quick response, 30 seconds or so, Irakli.
Sure. I mean, to comment on the poll here, certainly I don't know who sort of voted 8% on the current international regulation. I don't know any of the regulations which are there, which could be sufficient at all. Now, but on the serious note, actually, AI is developing so fast that that's why I'm not even sure that we need a current international charter or a convention which would we be implementing, because we don't know how fast this is going. At the moment, we are having international discussions already, and to test out some of those like a narrow governance, right? For example, in my field, we are looking at how to govern use of AI by law enforcement, how to govern this in the security field, how to govern it in the transportation, energy, and other sectors, and including in the healthcare. And I think this is very important that we should be sort of looking at this narrow applications, how to govern those sectors, and later on this would be translated. So as far as the future jobs are concerned, I think anything which would require creativity, which would require care, which would require operation together with the AI and machines would be very important, and creation of the machines which will ensure healthier and longer lives. And in the end, certainly Georgian winemaking will never be replaced by the AI AI or machines. Therefore, yes, we will be making wines here.
Very good. Just a very brief response as well, Marco.
By the way, we did a project with one of the Irish whiskey breweries. AI is now making whiskey. Apparently, it's really good. I didn't have a chance to try it.
We still don't have the AI making those
No, but
wines.
we have to leave something to the human taste. I agree. But when it comes to the result, well, I agree actually with your statement. We should find unified approaches within the industries. Because what I see now, I have some issues with some of my large customers. They want to implement a project that they can maybe implement in Slovenia, but they're also operating, I don't know, in Mexico. And they say, well, look, we can't use this there because it's prohibited to use cloud. So we have to find some common ground on, the foundations that can be used on a global level. Otherwise, we will always have issues. And, the whole forum is about the connectivity of the regions and how to work in a borderless manner, in a way. So I think we have to take the same approach when it comes to the use of AI in the future. When it comes to future jobs, I think a lot about it because I have two small kids at home. Well, they're still really young, 3 and 1 year old. But sooner or later we will talk with them about the endless possibilities that are ahead of them. And I agree with your statement. Something that is multidisciplinary, that you can connect multiple aspects, because AI, it's technology, is sociology, it's psychology, so multiple aspects. But at the end of the day, I'll advise them, look, pick something that drives you. This, I think, is the key takeaway.
And finally, final words on these two topics?
Well, I agree that completely new approach is needed because if we discuss only research, for example, there is no access to data for a number of countries and researchers, and we can take some good success story, for example, from China having the biggest data pool in the world. And for researchers, it's a fantastic opportunity. So opening an access to data and trying some new innovative ideas, it's very important. But if we do this, we need new regulations, because I don't know if any of them exist in our country regulating this process. And as for the future profession, well, I don't know. I have the only child who wants to become a truck driver. And what I would tell him is that maybe it's better for him to sit in the back office and be a truck driver, but be a computer scientist, and with this way help trucks to move on the road. So this is maybe my remark about this.
Fantastic. Well, we've reached the top of the hour and seeing some stares at the back of the room. I think it's been a fascinating discussion. It's evident that there's enormous opportunities across society to harness AI to solve some of our hardest problems, to help us get healthier and richer and increase well-being and drive really good progress in society. There are concerns. It's important we get the narrative right. There's some great takeaways there. I thought some of yours, Laszlo, were great around creating the ecosystem, building in collaboration, exploiting this huge amount of data available in our society at the moment. But we have to get the people bit right. We have to get the talent right to exploit this. We have to get education right. And we have to really focus minds on solving the most important challenges and really start trying to build in trust into the technology. There's so many opportunities with this. So in conclusion, I think we stand at a pivotal moment. The benefits this could offer in the next generation are phenomenal, but we need to be able to look our children in the eye in 15, 20 years' time and say, based on the knowledge we had today, we made the right decisions about what to do with this technology. And we don't want to be looking back in 20 years' time and regretting making these decisions. So with that in mind, I'd say let's listen to more Douglas Adams, and let's listen in particular more to people like wonderful panel here, Nino, Irakli, Armin, Nikolaos, Laszlo, and Marco. Thank you very much for listening. Right, I think coffee is served outside, so thanks for listening. It's been a great session. Thank you.
That's okay. Can I ask you to be seated, please, as we will be starting this session very soon. Thank you.
შევა დაბრძანდით, მალე დავიწყებთ სესიას.
Okay, can I ask you to be seated? Okay. Are we ready, ladies and gentlemen?
მზად ხალბატონებო და ბატონებო.
Great.
ძალიან კარგი, ძალიან დიდი მადლობა.
I think we're ready to begin.
ფიქრობ, რომ მზად ვარ დავიწყოთ.
I'm Juliet Foster and I'd like to welcome you to Transport Connectivity Transformation on
დაკავშირებულობაზე და ტრანსპორტირებაზე აბრეშუმის გზის გასწორება. სანამ განვიხილავთ საკითხს, მინდა პანელი წაგიდგინოთ. ქალბატონ ნატია თორნავას იგი გახლავთ ეკონომიკის და მიგრანტთა განვითარების მინისტრი საქართველოს.
Nati was appointed to this role in April 2019. She has a very detailed CV which is over there. She's doing a spectacular job. We're going to learn more about that. So thank you so much for your time. Can you also please extend that welcome to Yama Yari?
Yama Yaris მინდა მივესალმო.
Don't be shy about applauding, by the way.
კარგად დაუკრათ დაში, თუ შეიძლება. იამარი გახლავთ ეკონომიკისა და მიგრანტთა უკაცრავად. ტრანსპორტის მინისტრი გახლავთ ავღანეთის ისლამური რესპუბლიკის და 2018 წელს დანიშნამდე იგი გახლავთ სამოქალაქო სამუშაოების მინისტრი და განახორციელა ფუნდამენტალური რეფორმები 5 წლიანი გეგმით დეტალები გაქვთ მოცემული და მისი მიღწევები Ramin Gulizades.
Thank you. And he is the Minister of Transport, Communications and High Technologies of the Republic of Azerbaijan. This is a role that he's held since 2016. So thank you so much for joining us. Could you please also welcome
Rosen Gilyazov, Transportis Ministry, Informacijas და ტექნოლოგიებისა და კომუნიკაციების ბულგარეთის რესპუბლიკის, ასევე ევროპულ ინსტიტუტში, საჯარო ადმინისტრაციის ინსტიტუტში მაასტრიხტში ნიდერლანდებში წარმოადგენს თავის ქვეყანას, ასევე მივესალმოთ მემედ ჯაჰიდ Turkhans.
And he is the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure for the Republic of Turkey.
Ministri Turkეთის რესპუბლიკის მისი პროფესიული კარიერა დაიწყო თურქეთის მარეგულებელში თურქული ტრასების Vladislav Krikri.
Vladislav Krikri is the Minister of Infrastructure for Ukraine. He's also worked in the investment banking sector, which had stocks and securities department at Interbank
აქციებისა და
ფასიან
ქაღალდების ასევე არა მინისტრი ყავს Alberto De Pleto.
Umberto is the Secretary General of the International Road Transport Union. Now, he was appointed to this current role in June 2013. My understanding is that your goal for 2020, which is not far away, is the IRU to lead the transport industry, raising innovation, whilst also preparing for challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. There are plenty of things we have to work out for you. Good luck, someone has to do it. Okay, so these are the panelists.
ეს გახლავთ პანელის წევრები. კითხვა ისმის რატომ ვიმყოფებით აქ. მე კონტექსტში ჩავსვავ, იმიტომ რომ 6 წლის წინ როგორც ვიცით, ჩინეთმა მილიარდია დოლარიანი
which aspires to connect Europe with Asia and at the same time stimulate economic growth within and beyond the two continents. Now, in common with initiatives that came before or after the BRI, transport connectivity is an essential component. Now, the word connectivity is the latest big buzzword amongst experts, although an exact definition does remain elusive, but then it depends on how you define it. From the EU perspective, it embraces transport, energy, digital and human networks, along with rules, standards, and institutions governing the flows of interaction. It's fair to say that connectivity is the force that brings people, places, and opportunities together, hence why it's essential that policymakers approach and manage it sensibly to ensure it works efficiently. Now, that may require internationally agreed practices, conventions, and technical standards supported by global organizations, enabling the interoperability of networks and trade across borders. Now, the rewards, if you get the balance right, are tantalizing. Take the following stats into account. By 2040, the BRI could potentially boost global GDP by $7.1 trillion per annum, with related projects predicted to lift 7.6 million people out of extreme poverty and 32 million others out of moderate poverty. But it is worth remembering that connectivity doesn't come cheap. The Indicative Transport European Investment Plan, Action Plan, otherwise known as TENP, states that priority projects in Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, the Republic of Moldova excuse me, and Ukraine require an estimated investment of almost 13 billion euros. Assuming it goes ahead, that would result in 4,800 kilometers of road and rail, 6 ports, and 11 logistics centers. So the question, how should these initiatives be financed? And what's the criteria for determining which transport projects should be prioritized over others? And how do we ensure that these projects are not just sustainable, but also resilient? And what are the IT solutions to manage the very complicated real-time needs within these transport corridors? We also shouldn't forget that the quality of these large-scale projects can be uneven, while sporadic intermodal connections create barriers that can, for example, prevent railways running and functioning smoothly. So not only does that undermine seamless passenger and freight transportation, but it also highlights the scale of investment needed to fill the missing links between the different urban nodes. Finally, there is the issue of benefit distribution. You may find that areas that enjoy good access to different markets, like large cities or port regions, they stand to make the biggest gains from better trade links. In other words, connectivity improvements could focus economic activity in those areas at the expense of others. So there's plenty to think about, plenty for us to talk about. But let's explain what happens next, because our panelists will have 5 minutes to give a statement in connection with the discussion theme. Now, our time here is limited, so I really would appreciate it if you stick to 5 minutes. I have to be emphatic about that rule, and you can't run away from it because there's a clock. It counts you down from 5 minutes to 0, so there's no excuse for actually running over time. But we also want you, the audience, to get involved. Now, we want you to vote on Slido. If you go onto your website or your mobile, you can actually go onto the Slido site. The event code, Transport SRF, takes you into that question. From your perspective, what constitutes a major challenge for regional connectivity? From your perspective, what constitutes a major challenge for regional connectivity? Is it varying regulatory frameworks, policies, and approaches, or physical infrastructure gaps? So I would encourage you to please get involved and please vote. We will bring you the results of that vote, and indeed the poll itself will close 10 minutes before the end of the discussion. So let's now get on to the first of our statements, and that will come to us from Natia Ternova, the Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development for Georgia. So thank you so much for being with us. And also, I'd like to thank the Georgian government for hosting us, because you've done an absolutely splendid job. But the question which I want to put to you, really, as a follow-on from your statement, or the follow-on, is what Georgia itself is doing to fulfill its transport connectivity vision, because there's a lot going on which I'm sure you'd like to share with us.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good afternoon. First of all, as a co-organizer of today's event, I would like to express my gratitude toward each and every of you for being here with us, for participating in this very important event, Tbilisi International Silk Road Forum held under patronage of Prime Minister of Georgia. I would like to wish you successful discussions during these 2 days. And also I would like to take this chance and to thank the team which was involved in the preparation process. Thank you for your great job. Thank you for making this event happen. Today we are talking about connectivity. This is our main topic, and there is no doubt that connectivity nowadays has become the key enabler of trade, of investments, of economic development, and it is not surprising that connectivity is always in the center of our discussions when it comes to the regional integration and international cooperation. Georgia, since ancient times, was known as the natural contact point between East and West. And we are very glad to see that nowadays, when economic interdependence is growing and has necessitated the need for stronger transport infrastructure between Europe and Asia, Georgia, again, has continued to play the role of bridge builder between different parts of the world. Indeed, well-targeted, intensive reforms and efforts has been implemented by Georgian government during these years in order to strengthen our transport infrastructure and to provide better integration of our country, our transport network into global and regional value chain. On the side of hardware infrastructure, I would like just to mention that huge investments has been made by Georgian government during these years. Let me just name a few of important projects that has not only local domestic implication on the Georgian transport system, but also very positive and important implication for the whole renewed Silk Road area, modernization of Georgian railway, opening of the new Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway, construction of East-West highway, construction, development of Anaklia deep sea port, expansion of Kutaisi International Airport. These are just a few examples of huge infrastructural projects that together with other smaller projects shall improve performance of our local transport network and also to contribute into growing competitiveness of the whole Silk Road area, to increase reliability and capacity of our joint transport network. Apart from the infrastructure, apart from these big infrastructural projects, the special attention was always attached to the approximation of our legislation towards European transport acquis and international standards. It should be mentioned that more than 100 intergovernmental transport agreements has been concluded, which built very solid ground for future integration, legal and procedural integration of Georgia into the region. In this connection, I must also say that Georgia has made great efforts in ensuring efficient border management and efficient custom procedures to ensure very smooth, fast, and transparent movement of both goods and people through the borders. It also should be mentioned from our side that we are very well integrated in a number of regional initiatives. We are engaged in Troseka initiative, we are engaged in Karek, in Lapis Lazuli, now in a Middle Corridor initiative. Georgia was one of the first countries who expressed this strong support towards Chinese Belt and Road Initiative by signing Memorandum of Understanding within a BRI framework in 2015. And by this time, the first railway transportation has been carried out from China toward Georgia, which also built a real case ground for further development of Middle Corridor. So nowadays it is obvious that improved transport connection of Georgia can benefit not only landlocked countries of South Caucasus and Central Asia, but also can benefit China and European Union with a great interest to explore new markets. In this respect, I would like to mention also great importance of recent extension of Trans-European Network, TNT, towards Eastern Partnership countries, which first of all, of course, creates the favorable basis for further development and increase of our bilateral turnover of trade between us and European Union, but has also wider and bigger implications to the whole Belt and Road area and contributing to its competitiveness over other alternative routes. We're keen to improve connections via Black Sea ports to ensure that shipment of cargo to and from European Union handled by Georgian ports is conducted smoothly and within the possible minimum time. So it should be mentioned that just recently we launched new initiative, new services, feeder services between our Black Sea ports, Port of Batumi and Port of Constanza, which is also a very important development, but it is not enough, it is not sufficient, and we can do better and more, of course, in order to utilize more opportunities of growing connectivity of the Black Sea. We are conducting further studies in order to identify additional opportunities how to develop connectivity on the Black Sea. And during these 2 days, we also had very interesting discussions with our colleagues, and I would like to thank them. Yesterday, we had a discussion with our Bulgarian counterpart, how to increase the frequencies of ferry connections between ports of Bulgaria and Georgian Black Sea ports, and we're looking forward to further cooperation between us. Today, we also had a very interesting discussion with my Ukrainian counterpart. We discussed how to be more integrated with the new inland waterway initiative, which also creates a lot of new opportunities, not only for Georgia, but for other participants and counterparts within the Belt and Road initiative. And when it comes to the better utilization of Black Sea ports capacity, of course, we need to underline the utmost importance of our strategic project development of Black Sea deep water port, Anaklia port, which is very important for enabling us to handle more Panamax and post-Panamax vessels. While this kind of project usually takes time in order to be well structured, we do hope that with the joint efforts, we will soon be able to switch from the structuring process to the main construction stage, as this capacity, this port is very much needed, not only for Georgia, but it will have a very positive implications to the competitiveness of the whole road. And as Anaklia port is mainly focused and dedicated to the containerized cargo, I would like just to add very briefly, I know that I'm running out of time, but
so.
just as a co-organizer of a forum, excuse me, so I would like to add that in light of containerization, we already yielded very positive results. The record volumes of containers were handled by Georgian ports in 2018. The volume of containers exceeded 450,000 TEUs and showing 15% of annual growth compared to the previous year, as well as in current year, first 8 months, 37% of growth. It's unprecedented growth, which also creates additional justification for the commercial viability of development of additional deep sea port capacities at the Black Sea. Last but not least, I would like to touch upon development and our efforts in promotion of people-to-people connections and supporting more airlines entering our sky, air connectivity that is supported by Georgia, since touristic industry in recent years has become one of the winning industry for us and one of the real drivers for our economy. So it is very important for us to continue following the open sky principles that were introduced by Georgian government almost 20 years ago, and now we yielded a lot of positive results. Let me conclude by saying that our joint corridor has a lot of advantages and strengths over other alternative routes, but there is one specificity and challenge. The corridor contains many different participants, and only through joint efforts and through very strong integration and harmonization of procedures, we can overcome the challenges and we can keep our competitiveness very high. So thank you very much, and looking forward to interesting discussions.
Okay, thank you very much, Natia Turnova there. And Yami Yari, the Transport Minister for Afghanistan, plenty of things which emerged in that talk there, but the key point that there's something in it for everybody, this increased competitiveness, especially with landlocked countries. You have 5 minutes.
Yep. Thank you very much, Juliet. Thank you. Thanks very much, Juliet. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here amongst a distinguished panel and our participants. My appreciation goes to the government of Georgia and all the co-organizers and our counterpart, Minister Turnova here. She pretty much covered all aspects of the theme here, but the theme of the Silk Road Forum here fits very well within the vision and direction of our government. Over the past a few years, especially past 5 years with our administration, we have given a special focus and attention to the issue of transport. As a landlocked country, for many, many decades, we believed that we were very disadvantaged. However, now, with the new vision of our President Ghani, in the next 20 years, our location is going to be our most strategic resource. And for that to materialize, we needed to do a lot of homework, as well as some homework with our neighbors in the region. I believe before we start to address issues in terms of integration regionally, we needed to especially address some issues at home. These included fragmentation within the transport sector in the country. We had many entities operating rail, aviation, the road transport, and the public works, which I was responsible for. All of these entities were operating independently, and in-house we had issues, harmonization issues, and integration of plannings and implementation of projects. So what we did, we embarked on one of the biggest institutional reforms in the recent history of my country, and that is to merge these transport-related entities under one umbrella, which is Ministry of Transport, and I have the honor to serve that ministry now. All of this was exactly because we understood for us to fully realize our economic capacity and to make sure that our natural resources, which are abundant in the region and in the world, in terms of our iron ore, our copper, lithium, uranium, we have some of the biggest reserves in these minerals. However, even if we manage to extract them out of ground, we wouldn't be able to move them without a sustainable and efficient transport sector. So this was the reason and the thinking behind this very difficult reform, whether you look at it from a political perspective or whether you look at it from an institutional and administrative perspective or judicial perspective. It was a challenge, and we had to take it on. And in parallel, we started to become more integrated in the region. We are part of very excellent regional platforms like CAREC, which is helping us develop some of our corridors. and 3 of the corridors go through Afghanistan. Despite the security challenges that our country has been facing due to various factors, regional, global, and national, we have managed to move forward with our reform agenda. We have established new corridors. The most outstanding one is the Lapis Lazuli corridor, which was inaugurated, and we had our goods traveling from Afghanistan and reached Turkey a few weeks ago by road. We established a new rail corridor with China. We had our first shipment of cargo leaving Afghanistan. It reached China in less than 10 days. And also the port of Chabahar, and with cooperation from our neighboring country, Iran, and also India, has seen some of our cargo moving now between Afghanistan and India. So we're really engaged in many ways, and today I had the honor to meet with some of my counterparts who are here as well, and also IRU Secretary General, Mr. Preto. The future looks really good in terms of integration, but we also, the point I wanted to make is, we need to look inside and outside, inward and outward at the same time in order to be successful. And we have to understand that we cannot do it alone. If we focus just on our own interests, we will not succeed. We have to find our collective vision and be committed to it. We need the political will, we need the technical resources and capacities that all we have, share it, and then all benefit at the same time. Thank you very much, and sorry for the few seconds.
No, that's fine. Yamayari, thank you. So the key message to emerge from that presentation, that you have to start your internal homework first, and then once you've done that, you can then move outside if you're to make integration succeed. Ramin Namik-Oglu Gulajade, sentiments that I assume you would agree with. The floor is yours, sir. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I will speak in Russian language.
Of course, of course.
Possible. Спасибо.
Thank you very much once again. Thank you, distinguished moderator, as well as honorable ministers and all the recipients of Tbilisi Silk Road Forum. First of all, please allow me to thank the Georgian host for the invitation to participate in this important forum. Effective integration is essential, and we need to meet cargo shipment related requirements, and we are aware that effective connectivity between Europe and Asia along the Silk Road has a fundamental role for supporting trade and economic growth, for strengthening the partnership, and ensuring prosperous future for transport relations in the region. Silk Road was a great opportunity in order to ensure effective connectivity, as well as connecting cultures and connecting different regions and countries. I suppose that this issue should be ensured by institutional capacity building, and we want to utilize existing resources in our hand. We need to renew infrastructure, and we want to apply contemporary technologies in order to ensure transport sustainability development that will be precondition of country's economic growth. Azerbaijan pays an important attention to regional partnership for decades. Azerbaijan has taken a number of initiatives of projects regarding Euro-Asia transport shipment, including Trans-European Transport Network. I'd like to emphasize Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway project and railway exploitation, and Baku port operation and functioning, I'd like to emphasize partnership and close cooperation with neighboring countries attending this important event, but our partnership network covers more countries as well, not only neighboring countries, but other countries as well. And this transport cooperation is a fundamental of our future developments. And if we make a great effort in this direction, we will be able to ensure transport sustainability development, not only in our country, but in our partner countries as well. This forum enables us to share best practices, to share experience to one another, and based on this information, we can elaborate further steps. I'm confident that our cooperation based on confidence and trust will be a precondition of strengthening our cooperation in the future as well. Thank you very much indeed. ძალიან დიდი მადლობა. ხა გადავცემ სიტყვას როსენ ელიაკოვს, რომელიც გახლავთ ბულგარეთის ტრანსპორტის.
What is Bulgaria doing to progress the Silk Road? And give us an idea about why your country is strategically important to the project's success. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, dear moderator, dear colleagues, Mr. De Pretto. I've got 5 minutes, so I remember a quote by Benjamin Franklin, the American president. You know this guy from $100 banknote, and he said, "Time is money." In our world, time is money. The time is not renewable resource. So, in transportation, in policies regarding the transport systems, etc., we have to pay attention about the time. Today we have very fruitful conversation with my colleague regarding the intensification of link between Bulgaria through Black Sea to Georgia, and to double the ferry link, because it takes 2 days to transport 100 heavy lorries. At the same time, via land, it takes 4 to 5 days at the same price. So we are very happy that we find mutual understanding about this. You asked me about the role of Bulgaria. So Bulgaria lays down on the crossroads historically, and nowadays at least 4 corridors, part of the Trans-European network, are crossing Bulgaria. One of them is the Danube one. The other one, which is very important, it's the Southeast Mediterranean, which goes through Bulgaria to Turkey, to Greece. The extension now, after the Bulgarian presidency, and the extension to the Western Balkans, to Serbia, to North Macedonia, etc., of course, through the Black Sea to Georgia and forward. Bulgaria is, I'm the only representative of EU member states today, but this is not occasionally. Bulgaria lays on the occidental shoreline of Black Sea, Georgia is on the oriental one, so we are the hubs of Europe and Asia. Bulgaria enjoys a strategic geographical location, so we strive to preserve and to expand our transit potential. That's why we are participating in a lot of multilateral formats. Already was mentioned the Eastern Partnership, very important format because the extension of Trans-European network is through such initiatives. The other one is the Black Sea Economic Cooperation, which is not only gathering the countries around the Black Sea, but for example, the observers as countries like Germany, United States, and etc. So the importance, the political importance of the region, not only the region of around the Black Sea, which is historically very tension one, the Balkans, the Caucasus, etc., but the connectivity is a way to avoid and all political issues that are rising today, historically, and I hope that we can avoid it in the near future. So another initiatives we are actively participating are the Troseca initiatives. The very important corridors we're striving to develop, the Black Sea, the Persian Gulf and Black Sea, Caspian Sea transport corridor. So we're working very toughly with our colleagues because the corridors are not only a matter of infrastructure, but they are a matter of political understanding. They are a matter of avoidance of physical and non-physical barriers because time is money. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That really sums it up, doesn't it? Time is money, and how Bulgaria is using its geography to great effect to straddle these huge transport corridors and to make the best of it, to really help its own country and indeed to help those beyond. And I'd like to move now to Mehmet Chatli Turhan, who of course is the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure for Turkey. And I would imagine, Minister, that many of the ideas that arose from our Bulgarian colleagues, something that you yourself feel very strongly about, that you can recognize.
Teşekkür ediyorum Sayın Foster. Öncelikle tüm meslektaşlarımı ve değerli katılımcıları
You must be aware that under the course of the 30 years globalization, we are on the stage that, so we are handling and we are achieved the huge transport related figures. So the drive of regional economy is very strong, and economically, so there is a huge necessity that we increase the economic relations amongst us. So we are living in the period when economic and trade relations are developing in fast. So in Asian region, so we have 50% of transportation, which accounts for 50% of economic growth. Our goal is that in the region we should attain the higher quality of transportation and the mobility to be of a high quality. So as concerns the maritime shipments, so this is one of the way which is more often used, which is more and more often used. If we visit the point that amongst the country we have ever-mounting trade relationship herein, so the road as well as air freights and air transshipments are very important. I would like to single out the railway as well as the combined transshipment systems and their assistance. Besides that, so the UN has conducted certain activities where they looked at our region where the infrastructure is to be developed regarding the international transshipments. So Turkey to develop the transport connectivity, we should overcome physical and non-physical barriers, and we have undertaken many steps. Turkey over the last years, so invested $140 billion in infrastructural projects. So the transport investment, so the main goal of transport investment was to develop the transport concept between Europe and Asia and more rapid transshipment of goods. So our goal was to make our region international hub. Turkey is developing very quickly and also increasing the trade and economic relationship with the neighboring countries. Regarding One Belt, One Road project, so this project is very important. This is very important initiative. That's all. In the Caucasus region, the development of respective projects is acquiring a lot of importance. From Asia to from China to Central Asia, and then to freight cargo to Caucasus region. So serious projects are being carried out to end up with a modernized new Silk Road, and to attain success in this regard we need the reliable transportation networks to be built. And to this end, our transport network should be sustainable and successful. Herein I would like to mention the Marmaroy project as well as Tbilisi-Baku-Kars project. By consummation of this project, so the corridor will become more attractive. So Turkey, Azerbaijan, between Turkey, Azerbaijan and Georgia, so regarding railway as well as other fields, so the partnership existence, so from Beijing to London, so we have, building uninterrupted railway connection became possible, and that has already been achieved. By means of Turkey and the other countries, we can reach out to many regions in terms of cargo supply. Turkey is also has the outreach to many world countries by this corridor. By the said corridor, we can transship cargo to Africa as well, of course, by adding up additional projects. Eurasian Tunnel, Osman Gaziyev Bridge in Istanbul, high-speed railway bridge construction in Istanbul, as well as high-speed train Aegean Sea, so realization, Çanakkale, Izmir, and bridge is very important for making our corridor more attractive. And I would like that these projects that are being done under development to offer to our partners and the society of the region. So the work which we have done, and the goal of this work is not only for the countries of the region, but for the region and for the world, to ensure peace and prosperity, connecting people, and so getting people more familiar with one another. And I would like to add up at finally that for development of modernized Silk Road, so in our region, economic, political, and cultural relationship development is a must, which may yield a regional peace to us. And I do trust in this, and I wanted to share it with you. Besides you, thank you very much for getting me an opportunity to speak before you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Mehmet Cahit Turhan, who is the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure for Turkey. So again, some key things coming out there that Turkey keeping pace with its own economic growth and indeed the general thrust towards globalization. Everybody stands to gain by making partnerships. In other words, the point that I raised in my own introduction about benefit distribution. And I'd like to thrust the ball in the direction of Vladislav Krikli to get your take on this from the Ukraine perspective. You have 5 minutes, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Julia. I want to welcome and say that I'm very excited to be on this panel with ministers, with my colleagues. And I want to greet for the highly brilliant organized this forum of Silk Road of Tbilisi. We are very excited, but I have two news actually for all participants. And I want to share these thoughts. First of all, every of us has the fault and the problem. We still not invented the teleportation, So we still need to discuss about transportation corridors, Silk Roads, and we're still at the same page. The second one, we understand that now we, at the temp of fast-moving and growing economies and challenging each other, we need to make partnership, we need to cooperate, and we, of course, need to make former procedures to kill bureaucracy and to organize not just simple corridors, transportation corridors, but digital corridors. Because my colleague, Minister of Infrastructure of Bulgaria, indeed, I agree totally that money is the time is the money. We want to save the time. The main two targets which we could achieve with infrastructure is to send the passenger or the good in the lowest price, at the cheapest way, of course, to the destination we need, and as fast as it's possible. I want to share the experience of Ukraine. Now we have the unique situation. We have a newly elected president, newly elected parliament, newly elected cabinet of ministers, and we have such a very fruitful triangle which demonstrates unique partnership, unique cooperation. There is no politician debates at all, and we hardly day by day work on developing the economy. And the base of economy and trading is, of course, infrastructure. Export-import operation always depends on the infrastructure. Is it developed or not? During 1 month and a half, our parliament has voted for a number of laws higher than during the last 3 years. And of course, there are a list of legislation which I want to share with you. First of all, it's concession. We clearly understand that state should make governmental policy, state policy. We should be policy owners, but the best way to achieve the results is to cooperate with business units, and give them the administration. That's why we are ready to cooperate on the PPP projects. We have two big bills of law is for the railway transportation and for interland waterways. And it will influence on the transport landscape of the Silk Road. And I will tell you why. Interland waterways, if of course our neighbors from Poland will support this big project, because this interland waterway connects Ukraine, Belarus and Poland, we can connect Baltic Sea, Black Sea, and of course Caspian. It's a great challenge, and we are ready to deal with it. We already started the formal procedures, and starting from the second part of the next year, we will be ready to make first interland waterways transportation from Belarus to Black Sea. About railway transportation, we have the same situation. We are preparing for a difficult story which is called unbundling. We want to create 3 separate operators which will administrate infrastructure, passenger and cargo transportation. And all not profiled assets we want to give to the privatization or to concession. So just a simple story. Our central railway station last year had $2 million losses. But it's the McDonald's, which is just located just next to this railway station. It's one of the top 5 mostly visited at the world. So how could we explain it? Of course, we want to share the experience and to give the possibility to private investors to come to our country, to invest in our country. We are ready to create the umbrella. We are ready to build better legislative ground, and of course we will support you as much as possible. And to develop the transport corridors, we need to start the procedures when we are exchanging not the papers, but exchanging the data. When I mentioned about digital TEN-T, I mean that every paper, every next paper is a loss of money, is a loss of time. So we need to change these procedures and to make some combined, unique and mutual beneficial digital procedures where we can change only the data, and not people, not the business will need to run to bureaucratic offices and to the representatives of the state, but only the computer digits. So we are ready for the new challenges. We accept it, and we will be pleased to share our experience with you. Please come and invest in Ukraine.
An offer we can hardly refuse. Thank you. And let's move on to our final speaker, Umberto De Pretto. You have 5 minutes, but interestingly enough, what was touched on there, from my perspective, seems to chime with your vision for 2020 that I've referred to earlier.
Thank you.
Is the microphone working? This one is. We'll swap.
Teamwork, thank you.
Teamwork, cooperation.
It's a great honor to sit here with 6 minutes, and you would expect me to say something different when what they said, but I can say that everything I've heard so far is music to my ears, and there are some things in particular that jumped out. But I love listening to people talk about connectivity and globalization and how we need to reap the benefits. But just to put it in all perspective, and just as you were invited now to Ukraine, I invite you all to Geneva, Switzerland, where I live, to have a cup of coffee with me, so I can explain to you connectivity and globalization by looking at a simple cup of coffee, and explain to you to have that cup of coffee requires 29 companies from 18 countries to sit down and have a simple cup of coffee. Juliet, I ask you, how many suppliers do you think go into making a car? So 29 companies for a cup of coffee, how many to make a car? Give me your best guess.
Oh, good Lord, 35.
35, very close, 30,000.
I just missed a few zeros.
Yeah, just a few, missed a few zeros. 30,000, and that's what connectivity means. Connectivity means if you want to have everything you enjoy today, you better be connected or you ain't going to get it. All right, that's the first thing I wanted to highlight, that connectivity is imperative for production, let alone trade and everything, just to have what we have on our tables. I love what the minister from Afghanistan was talking about, taking advantage of his geographic situation. Despite my Italian name and my North American accent, I live in a country, as I just said, Switzerland, that is landlocked, and it's doing very well, despite it being landlocked. You have to have an approach in your mind that you're going to be land-linked, not landlocked, but land-linked, and put in place all the policies to reap the benefits of your geographic position, and we'll work together with the minister to make sure that that happens in Afghanistan. Which brings me to another point, and that is that I love hearing this discussion about building infrastructure. Every millimeter of roads that are built, we're happy, because it allows us to do our job better. But what is the utility of building kilometers and kilometers of highways that let us to go very quickly along the highway, and then to get to a border crossing to do our interconnectivity and wait there for hours, days, even weeks? We've done analyses that show up to 57% of our time is lost at borders. And as we know, time is money. 38% of our costs are due to illicit payments or backsheesh because of this environment that is conducive to corruption that is created when you have people just waiting at borders saying, how do I get across? So we have to speed that up, because time is money. If we want to be connected, it needs to be quickly, it needs to be digital, it needs to be intermodal. We need to move forward. The problem is that often we hear governments have the audacity to speak about sustainable development goals. And if we just look at a border crossing, again, I love the high statements, but bring it down to reality, and you're at a border crossing, and say, what is sustainable development in real terms? You have a truck that is stopped for days, even weeks. That means the economy is stopped. You have a driver that is stuck there, is being held hostage. So how can you even discuss social equity when the driver can't go anywhere, can hardly even go to the washroom. There are no proper facilities. And then we talk about, yes, sustainable development, the rights of the people, et cetera, et cetera. And then we talk about environmental protection, where the vehicles are obliged to just wait at the border and wait, idle, not to lose their space, and just move forward. I mean, it's unacceptable. Two of the countries sitting at the table here, I visited one of the border crossings, I won't mention which, but we were told by the customs, can you imagine, it only takes us 2 minutes to process a truck. I said, that's fantastic, but it takes 2 days from the truck to go from one side to the other side. And that means your economy is completely penalized by this because time is money. It's not the truck that is blocked. It's not the driver that's blocked. It's the economy that is standing still. And until we start understanding that the best way for an economy to function is for that truck, through electronic means, to pre-announce its arrival with a pre-declaration, that the customs does its assessment, says nothing wrong with that, and 99.9% go right through without even stopping. That's connectivity. Otherwise, we're just putting fancy words to say, well, you're still going to stop at the border, be stuck. We'll talk trade agreements, but in our trade agreements say, we will trade. Yes, but you're not going to be connected. Connected means you basically have borderless and seamless transport. You need security. And we'll talk perhaps later about the tier system that we run, but in 17 years we've run the tier system. We've not had one major security breach. So you can have facilitation and security at the same time. Just to ensure that as the representative of the road transport, I'm on time, I will stop 10 seconds ahead of my time and give the floor back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Umberto De Prete, that was fantastic. Before I actually start asking our panel questions, can I also remind you as well that there is that poll. Hopefully the question will be coming back up on the screen. That was our Slido poll. I don't think it will be coming back, but let me just remind you. The question was, from your perspective, what constitutes a major challenge for regional connectivity? There it is. We can see that vote coming through already. It could change, of course. These things always do. So remember, go onto Slido using your mobile handsets, and if you want to access the question, there it is. 65% of you think it's answer A, 35% of you answer B. So remember, the access code, Transport SRF, Transport SRF. Okay, let's move on to the questions. And I'd like to direct them at two of our panelists. First, Ramin Oğlu-Gülüzade. From your perspective, are there ideal conditions, or what are the ideal conditions for developing sustainable transport infrastructure projects? And more importantly, how would you go about achieving this? Because as we've been hearing, it's very complicated, particularly if you want that seamless connectivity.
Спасибо большое. Конечно, в первую очередь.
First and foremost, the good neighboring relations plays an important role between countries. For example, we have good neighboring relations with our neighboring countries. We have close cooperation with neighboring countries, and through this close cooperation, we take part in different projects, including transport-related projects. I would like to single out the main pillar, Baku-Tbilisi-Kars project, that connects us to our neighboring countries, and we are capable to develop a transport sector in a dynamic way. And the second principle is that business composition is essential. We need to identify common effect. And the third point is that this is important to have the stable financing of projects. I suppose that projects should be funded properly, and in addition, PPP, public and private partnership, plays an important
in terms of the ideal conditions and how do you achieve it? Stable finance is part of it. Very easy to say, very difficult to achieve, I would imagine.
In my opinion, when it comes to the big infrastructural projects and their sustainability, let me put it in a slightly different way. I think that this issue has two different dimensions, and First, if seen in light of environmental sustainability and climate change, I think that as a Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia, with emphasis on sustainable development, we always keep very high on our agenda these kind of issues, and whenever possible we're giving priority to more eco-friendly, ecologically clean technical solutions over other less ecologically friendly modes of transportation, such as railway, especially passengers transportation by Georgian Railway, considering that we are the touristic country and it is very important for us to preserve our nature. This is the first dimension. And another dimension, as you mentioned, and my colleague from Azerbaijan already mentioned, it means economical sustainability of infrastructural projects. And of course, this kind of projects usually requires huge financial resources and long-term investments. And of course, to make them economically, financially viable and sustainable, first of all of us have to conduct very detailed technical, financial, commercial studies of the projects, but also technical engineering studies, because many of those projects are very complicated from the engineering point of view. But even those studies are conducted, it is not 100% guaranteed that the project will be sustainable. And then, as my colleague from Azerbaijan mentioned absolutely correctly, there are special framework like public-private partnership framework, and we have this special PPP law in force since 2017, and this framework allows us to provide and to offer to the private businesses more proper distribution of the risks, better risk allocation, risk-sharing mechanisms, and whenever applicable, we're offering this kind of transaction structure to the private businesses, which allows private businesses to step into such kind of projects, and which allows societies to have more funds available for development of the infrastructure. I think this is the only proper way to address this kind of challenges.
Excellent, and let's stay with that, because this is where I'd like to bring in Vladislav quickly, but I'm looking in particular at transport connections along the Silk Road, because it is this interaction of the business environment, the public sector, and the international community to create these comfortable conditions for the transportation of goods. What do you think about that interaction? Is that the way forward?
Yes, Julia, of course. We do cooperation with our international financial institutions. We are very proud that they support us and excited that they want to proceed with new projects, new plans. First of all, of course, the government need to create the base of support, and you need to believe in new challenges, in new products which you want to receive some technical and financial support from the side of IFIs. And of course, when you do talk about transport investment in some transport connectivity, never it could be done separately. So what I mean, if you're developing the roads, you need to develop also the aviation, you need to develop the interland waterways, you need to develop the sea. It's one big organism. So it's impossible when you live without hands or without legs. Same situation with transportation. And they see our will to create one logical basement to develop in these projects. We have just a few numbers. Now we have 11 joint projects with European Investment Bank, with European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, with World Bank. It's up to $3 billion of US dollars, the total amount of these products. They see we are launching always new approaches. For example, we intend to build during the next 5 years and restore 24,000 roads. And the building the roads, it's not just, it's never could be done. So you build the roads, in some short or long-term period, they became not in the good mood. You need to restore them again. And we decided to win the situation. We decided to change the approach. And starting from this year, it's like an example, we are investing in a weight-in-motion complex. So it's like automated system which will help us to survive the roads on a longer term. And of course, such decisions are more environmentally friendly, they're saving the funding of the government, and of course they're always supported by European and different financial institutions.
It reminds me of this phrase, scale of ambition, this ongoing investment in infrastructure, because it can't take care of itself. But let's take this concept of scale of ambition, because Rosen Jeliazkov, I'd like to bring you in here, because we've been looking at the Silk Road Initiative, but more from the Bulgarian perspective, and just that reminder that it merges the land-based Silk Roads. We're going from China via Central Asia to Turkey and the EU, with the maritime route. So there we're going from the Indian Ocean and Africa to Europe. Now we know that the two routes, they were created with the aspiration of developing transportation infrastructure, facilitating economic development and increasing trade, ticking all the right economic boxes. So from your perspective, what are the components, if you like, for developing the road and rail infrastructure if you're going to achieve these goals? Because these are very lofty ambitions which require a lot of money and political commitment. There's some very sleek footwork that's required if you're going to meet these needs.
Well, so I would like to interlink your question with the answers that are obvious regarding the main challenge.
Can I interrupt one moment? I think we've got a problem with your... That's yes, it, working now, that's great. We couldn't hear you terribly well.
Okay, so of course, speaking about the regional approach, we have the predominant role of infrastructure. That's why the infrastructure like a connection, land or Black Sea one, it's under development. The land connection is through Turkey. So my colleague mentioned about the excellent connection that we have about the roads and the railroads. They're under construction. Their railroad connection from Bulgarian border to Istanbul. So very soon, because in our part is already built, and we'll have the opportunity to travel from Serbian border to Istanbul with velocity approximately 200 kilometers, if needed, of course. At the same way, in our multilateral initiatives, we're talking about the Black Sea Ring Road within the Evolved Country Initiative of Black Sea Partnership. We're talking about the highway through the sea. So these initiatives are, as I already mentioned, are not only political, they are very feasible. But my feeling is that we have to pay attention first of the infrastructure, and second, avoidance of all burdens, crossing borders, administrative burdens, administrative, how to say,
hurdles.
Yes.
Yeah, obstacles.
Yes. Today, of course, we're at the threshold of the era of the smart mobility. We're talking now about driverless cars, vehicles. Soon we'll talk about driverless. Today, I read a published report of ICAO. This is the International Civil Aviation Organization, that mentioned a problem that is observed about the lack of, somehow lack of interest from the pilots because of penetration of a lot of automatization information system in the aircraft. But this is some concern, but we have to adapt to the new mobility era, because in the near future, maybe the aircraft are going to be pilotless instead of returning to analog
So they have to accept the inevitability of that.
In this meaning, the digital agenda, it's not only regarding the processes, it's regarding the infrastructure, regarding the vehicles, it's regarding everything we're aiming to as fantasies at the moment, but the future is coming very fast to us.
Okay then, and let's think slightly outside the box just for one moment, which is what I would like you, Mehmet Cahit Turhan, to do for me, and also Yama Yari. But if I could start with you first, Mehmet. Does innovation guarantee better transport connectivity? And how should transport planning authorities harness that innovation to secure a good result?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to note that in global world, certain problems are caused. We face with certain problem regarding shipment. Also, we are aware environmental related issues, will it be air pollution or climate change. That's why our foremost objective is to take new initiatives to introduce new systems that will be environmentally friendly, for example, railway system. For this purpose, we are moving to electric mobiles, and we're moving to new systems, and we're introducing new systems for cargo shipment as well. That is why application of contemporary high-tech will enable us to accelerate cargo shipment. In technological innovation as well as in shipment sector are striving to keep base as well as to invest a lot of money in transport sector. It is essential to us to implement tailor-made approach and to implement projects in compliance with international standards, as well as to move to smart mobility and to apply smart mobility for cargo shipment. Smart devices or through smart mobility, we will be able to achieve set goals that will be beneficial for our country's economic development. We want to integrate local economy to world one. For this purpose, we need to take new initiatives. I would like to single out a number of projects in this regard. Asia, between Europe and Asia, Yavuz Sultan Selim bridge construction. This bridge is under construction, and this bridge will be the longest one all over the world. In addition, in Istanbul, we are constructing new two-story transport tunnel. That is all I'd like to mention. Thank you very much indeed.
Can I take that question and put it to you, Yamayari, about innovation? Does it guarantee better transport connectivity? And from your perspective, how should planning authorities actually harness that innovation if they're to deliver on the results that the end users expect?
Thank you, Juliet. Certainly I can say it facilitates efficient. There are aspects of it that we have to be careful. I mean, and then to say guaranteed connectivity, it may be an overstatement for some countries. it relates to the context of which country you're talking, what level of development, what's the pace of development in that country, especially in human capital, and how advanced your human capital is in terms of technology, understanding technology, and being able to work with it. I say this because I have an example in mind for presidential elections, and for the sake of better transparency and efficiency, we hired some of the best technology, German technology, to manage the elections. However, on the elections days, we had issues because our people couldn't actually utilize it. There were aspects of training for it. Those are some issues that we have to be, but absolutely it enhances connectivity, it increases efficiency. In some countries around Europe and around the world, you go and you have seamless connectivity. Authorities can harness for example, in my ministry, what I proposed that we set up a technological hub like what they have in, they have a tech park. So I went and visited, and it was an excellent place where young people or entrepreneurs and startups, the tech companies come with their ideas. You can pilot it. We can start piloting some of these technologies in some aspects of the transport sector. But we are already using innovative methods in our aviation sector, especially. Some of our companies are doing really well. But you have to have a holistic approach and a view on how you can utilize this. It depends on a few factors that you have to take into account before you fully engage. And I recommend a phased approach may give better results. I hope I've answered.
I think you have. Thank you very much on that. And I mean, look, Umberto, from your perspective, look, we've touched on this. We've had references to smart technology and certainly how Turkey has been using it effectively in terms of its connectivity strategy. But I mean, what is the role of digitalization on transport and transit facilitation, including the Silk Road? And more importantly, what is the IRU's experience in that regard?
Thank you. I think it's a very pertinent question for the simple reason, like I was saying earlier about the cup of coffee, we have to look at reality. And in my reality, I look at it in my family. I have a 21-year-old son and a 19-year-old son. If it's not on here, it doesn't exist. It just simply does not exist for them. And you have to understand that companies like Uber, companies like Amazon, they're not targeting us, they're targeting them. Because they're not saying this is the generation of tomorrow, it's a generation of today. So if you're not going digital, you're already dead. I mean, there are very few dinosaurs like me who still write things down on paper. The minister wrote everything down in his iPad.
I'm a dinosaur too, because
online.
I've been writing.
Absolutely perfect. Because that's today's reality. Everything must be digital. And the minister from Ukraine obviously has it right, because you're closer to my son's age than you are to my age, and thank God for that we have a youthful minister who understands today's realities. You understand that it must be digital, it must be intermodal, forget all these walls. But the only way we'll get rid of those walls of modes is by going digital. Because the biggest, and before working at the IRU, I was at the International Chamber of Commerce, and I remember the debates back then 25 years ago, where everybody would be saying, oh no, my mode is special, so I need my own convention. Oh, I need this because we're special. We fly, we float, we go on roads. Nonsense. Nonsense. Shippers want goods delivered from point A to point B quickly, efficiently, safely, securely. That's all they care about. And in economy, that's all they care about. They don't care about which mode. So to have these interfaces, we must do it. Now, what the IRU has done is we spend hundreds of millions to put in place a system where we can have in real time information that goes to customs authorities about the truck that is coming, the vehicle, who's the driver, what goods are coming. We send electronic pre-declarations to the customs authorities so they can do their proper risk assessment. And by doing this, we open up many doors to better trade, a great trade that is secure, but it's not enough. It's not enough to have e-tier, just like it's not enough to have this phone. You need a bunch of apps. When you start a transport movement, you start with what we call CMR, the contract of carriage. Unfortunately, on this stage, only 2 countries have acceded to the eCMR protocol. So we can talk all we want here about, yes, we need to be digital, but then we need to put in place the instruments that give us the legal framework to go digital. Even tier, that we've spent big bucks on making it digital, and it's completely digital, but we still have a tier convention that forces us to have paper. And we have one country that blocks us from going completely digital, because it's in their self-interest to say, let's stay with paper so it makes your system less competitive vis-a-vis ours. They said, I don't care. I will still go ahead and I'll put in place digital from point A to point B, if it means more cumbersome MOUs and agreements, but we will go digital because, going back to my sons, if it's not on here, it doesn't exist. And I close my remarks saying, thank God that I'm on social media so they know that their father still exists somewhere. Thank you.
Reassuring words there. Before I ask you the... I think we can all agree. In fact, I'm going to applaud you from one dinosaur to another. But before we go on to the second question, can I also remind everybody, please do get involved with that vote. It's on Slido. We've actually got some results coming through at the moment. I think there's been a slight shift in the numbers, in fact. Because in relation to that question, from your perspective, what constitutes a major challenge for regional connectivity? The response to answer A was 61%, so that's gone down slightly. So physical infrastructure gaps, it's gone up a bit, 39%. Look, it's something. it's something, but please do keep on voting through. So time is running fairly tight, but let's crack on with the second question. This is going to you, Yamayari, because look, what I'd like to know is why, from your perspective, we do have a weak integration between some Silk Road economies and regional global markets, and how should governments deal with these variables? More specifically, should they spend more cash, or should they focus instead on the service rather than the infrastructure gap?
I believe it depends on which part of the world you're in, what sort of history those regions or those countries go through, and either are they coming out of it. So there may be some issues to be resolved amongst the neighboring countries within a region, and this is what we are actively trying to do. We have seen excellent integration and cooperation with our northern neighbors. Now we have more options to be connected to the world, our northern countries' networks, whether that's rail or road. And the way we approached it basically is through dialogue and understanding that our prosperity or economic and otherwise our prosperity and security is interdependent. So what we've done, we've tried to encourage the region and our neighboring countries to come and sit down and let's talk about how we can interlock our economies by investing mutually on regional projects. So the TAPI projects, that's the gas pipeline that will move substantial quantities of gas from Turkmenistan, our colleagues are here, through Afghanistan, through Pakistan, to India. This is one of the biggest regional projects. We have another project called TAP for electricity, the CASA 1000 for transferring electricity from Tajikistan to Pakistan. It's basically come down to political will and maybe, you know, sorting out some of our egos and understanding the future generations and the current generations need to work together in order to be prosperous and successful. I don't know how much time we have, but can we continue talking about?
I would love to. Perhaps we can continue when the session is over, but time is very, very tight. But so if you could make your point very briefly, please.
The point that Mr. mentioned and resonate a lot with what we experience as well. Thousands and thousands of trucks are queuing for hours and days to just cross a crossing point or a border. Fortunately, we started some dialogue with our countries. This relates to Pakistan. Despite the sad situation that affects some parts of the region, we basically agreed to open operationalize the customs at the crossing, to make it just 24 hours instead of 8 hours a day. So now we're hoping that will benefit the people on both sides. There are some systemic issues. Again, we need to look at how we can simplify our regulations. In the past 4 years, our government has passed nearly 500 legislative pieces. This is historic in any term for my country, and the main reason for this was to facilitate better trade, better movement, and better services for the people. But still, there's a long way to go. I think we need to work on awareness, on cultural awareness around some of these issues. But if we agree to work together.
Sure, the value of partnerships, but again, an example of that happening there with your neighbour Pakistan and that border crossing. And let's go now to Rosen Geliaskov, because a lot of the discussion that we've had from Bulgaria's perspective has been with the Black Sea, and in particular that development of those transport links along the Silk Road. You have alluded to that. In the time available, give us an idea about the strategic importance of the Black Sea in terms of fulfilling those objectives.
The role of Black Sea, of course, is not only being a border between different states. Black Sea is a transport corridor without borders. And speaking about the borders, I fully support the assessment that the queue at the borders are very sustainable and very, at the moment, big issue. Approach of the Baltic countries that implemented an information system for queue avoidance. It's an electronic system that allows paperless for the hauliers to reserve the slot to crossing the border. So we have to learn from the good approaches, from the best practices of the Baltic countries, and this mistake is maybe on purpose about the Balkan countries, and to implement such systems. Of course, today I share that the Black Sea is not only a transport corridor. The Black Sea is, as its sea, it's very important for leisure, for tourism, etc. But because of some political issues and situation in the Black Sea, we can only use it now for transportation, and we have to use this because this year in Montenegro there was 400 cruise ships, in Port of Burgas only 2. But we have to foster the usage of these natural resources as the sea offers. Of course, with our neighbors, with Romania, we're in a huge competition at our ports. But now we strive to convert our ports through the public-private partnership under the concession management into very successful example of good management. We've got integrated all electronic system about the vessel management, about the port management, about the interoperability with railroad management system, about rail, ferries, interconnection. So the approach for public-private partnership will convert as a best example for development of port infrastructure, which example has the same in Georgia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And let's go back as well to the question of funding. Again, we've touched on it in terms of the sheer cost of individual projects. And Mehmet Cahit Tarhan, I'd like to bring you in onto this question. Given the large number of connectivity initiatives that are currently around, how do you determine which transport projects are worth financing? What are the key things that you personally look for?
Thank you very much for your interesting question. It's a great honor for me to take part in this discussion. Turkey is a regional hub that is located between Asia and Europe. Due to our geographical location, infrastructural projects implementation is crucial for us, and accordingly our infrastructural projects are implemented in a way to respond ongoing challenges we face with. As we do aware, currently transport corridor, there is huge potential in terms of transport corridor. Accordingly, individual shipment is impossible. We are in need to have close regional cooperation indeed. For this purpose, it's necessary to look at this issue in a broader manner and to facilitate large cargo shipment. Turkey draws huge attention to cargo shipment. In addition, it is essential to develop a more stable and sustainable model. For example, we highlight significance of railway projects. I'd like to single out that it is essential to implement Marmaris project. In addition, Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway. These projects will connect us to Caspian Sea, and accordingly we will deepen and strengthen our cooperation with this region. In addition, I'd like to note road infrastructure development. Road infrastructure development is meaningful for our country's economic growth as well as our country's prosperity, because similar projects implementation will facilitate more job creation and well-being of our society. And Turkey in this regard has tightened cooperation with partners and implements significant number of projects through assistance of our partners. As for innovation, Turkey is implementing innovative projects as well. We have also close connection and cooperation with the private sector. We selected the proper financial model in order to facilitate cooperation with private sector. I'd like to note land as well as air transport. We have a cooperation with private sector in these directions. And we will introduce more innovative projects through this cooperation.
Much for that, Mehmet Cahit Tarhan. And Vladislav Krikli, moving things on a bit, the goal is to ensure the reliable, safe and rapid movement of goods in the direction of Europe and Asia. So in your point of view, how can this transport corridor be more efficient and ultimately profitable?
Julia, I want to go back to digital agenda and to go further with the things which said Umberto. Just keep in mind that someday even every of us will become a number of digits when we will be dead. So we talk about very difficult things, but something digital is only 2 digits, 0 and 1. Every information is a combination of 0 and 1. So the simple binary code could help the transport corridors move faster, to export and import goods better and faster, in more convenient, more efficient way. Real example, we have connection Baltic and Black Sea. If we want to use the railway transportation of type multi-type Viking, for example, we need 9 different types of transportation when we are moving through this corridor. On every stage, you need some information. You need to put in and output some information. It's loss of time, loss of money, and of course, loss of, first of all, you are losing the position. You are dead in context of transport system if you are not dealing with that the better way. We have a special program which is supported by President, by Prime Minister. It is called State in Smartphone. So every information, we have a large program on 2 years. So every administrative service, every state service should be digital by default. So firstly digital, of course, if someone needs extra paper, please receive the paper, by digital by default. And on this example, with nine corridor connecting Baltic and Black Sea, just imagine if we will realize it on the basis of e-port, on e-customer service, it will work much faster, much easier. And of course, the business will make a proper choice when we'll invest in this or other corridor and will create this or another transport corridor. So the Silk Road is about opportunity, but also it's about a new approach. We need to discover this approach and implement it with new instruments, with new digital approach at first, by default. So be digital or die. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, time is running very, very tight, but ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your patience. We did start late, but Nadia Ternova, I want to look at border crossings and customs clearance procedures, but more specifically, the effect they have on transport connectivity standards across the different corridors, but from Georgia's perspective.
So since we are running out of the time, I will not torture you with a long list of reforms that has been implemented by Georgian government. I would like to say briefly that as a result of those reforms, the custom clearance and border procedures takes only from 4 to 5 minutes in case of export and 3 to 4 minutes in case of transit at the Georgian borders. Is it sufficient? Not of course, because I would like just to come back to the point mentioned by my Bulgarian colleague. In the upcoming era of driverless cars, we need to think about paperless procedures and fully digital system of border crossing. And I would like also to reiterate also the point that my Ukrainian colleague mentioned, answering the question towards audience. I think that nowadays killing bureaucracy along the Silk Road still represents the biggest challenge, which is bigger than physical gaps of physical infrastructure, as many countries are investing heavily in physical infrastructure and improving it steadily, but to eliminate the regulatory barriers, it really requires a lot of political will, a lot of common efforts. So let's be digital. I would like just to join my colleague from
The future is digital, everybody. Nadia Ternova, thank you so much. And Umberto De Pretto, you coined this phrase, so you're responsible for it. But look, the IRU is mandated by the United Nations to manage the TIR system, and there has been a reference to this in the time that we've been together. And what I'd like to know is, how could TIR reduce the cost and time of transport on the Silk Road if it's compared to air and maritime transport?
Thank you. We've been running already a number of trucks from China to Europe and of course monitoring the time taken and also the obstacles that they're facing along the way. We've seen that we can actually run trucks from Western China to Europe in 12 days. And that's including the obstacles that they're facing. We've run a truck from southern China to southern Spain in 16 days. 16 days? 16 days. Now, compare that with other modes. If you go on the maritime, you're going to take about 54 days the moment the ship leaves the port and gets into a European port. Not mentioning the fact that before it gets on the boat, it probably has to wait 2 weeks in the port and then another 2 weeks to get out of the port and to the final destination. So huge time savings, and time is money, as we've seen. The cost is comparable today to rail, but rail will increase because the Chinese government has been highly subsidizing the railway. So the moment the subsidies disappear, rail costs will go up. This is the shocker. It takes the same time for us to send a truck from China to Europe as it takes to send a plane. Yes, the plane is fast, but to actually get the goods onto the plane and off the plane, it's the same time as it takes us to go from door to door. But air transport is 5 to 10 times more expensive than by road. So if time is money, this is a viable option. Now, it does not mean everything is going to go by truck. Every mode will be used. Maritime will continue to be the lion's share of trade between China, Europe, and the rest of the world. But depending on the goods that you're moving, when they are time-sensitive or high-value goods, people will start seriously looking at road transport as a viable option. And I think this is the way we're going. With the tier system, in fact, the Belt and Road Initiative, one of the 10 priorities of the Chinese government was to implement tier. For those of you who in your countries you have implemented tier, let me give you one figure to show you how serious China is about the implementation of the UN Tier Convention, which, for those of you who don't know it, allows a truck to be inspected at origin and go to the final destination, and between every border not be re-inspected, and we issue 200 billion euros in guarantees to customs authorities every year to allow the system to run. But when we look at this, it's incredible to see the time savings we can have. And with this, I think this is the big thing, that the Chinese have said, we believe in this so much that they've opened, and especially from Turkey, listen to this number, 1,200 customs offices inland for tier. It shows you how serious they are about implementing tier and how they see this as really the global instrument to allow us to be interconnected in a seamless way, and most importantly, in a secure way.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you. And I'd like now to put the final question to Ramin Nameoglu Guluzade, and it's really looking at technology, but more specifically, how does technology, in your opinion, create platforms for collaboration, and could they be a catalyst for integrating economies in different transport corridors?
Thank you very much for your interesting question. The ministry is responsible for this direction as well as information technological information introduction or implementation. We are introducing not only communication technologies in the transport sector, but in other sectors as well. Nowadays, transport without digitalization is impossible. We are working on this direction as well in order to move to the digital direction. It covers all sectors, not only transport one. And this digitalization refers to all components, all sectors, including transport, as well as cargo shipment. We take into consideration transport requirements and transport corridor requirements. It is essential to process information, and we are moving to digital approach in order to simplify service providing aspects and in order to accelerate customs clearance procedure. It is essential to raise awareness on digitalization, and it is essential to apply contemporary approaches in order to achieve sustainable development of transport. Thank you.
Much, sir. Okay, so we're in the final furlough, and what I can say is that the poll is now closed, and the results, they have come through. Hopefully they should be coming up there. What a difference. It was a 60-40 split originally to that question. From your perspective, what constitutes a major challenge for regional connectivity? Now 54% of you believe that varying regulatory frameworks, policies and approaches, that is the major challenge. On the other hand, 46% of you disagree with that. You feel that it's physical infrastructure gaps. I mean, let's just move along the panel very, very briefly to get their response to that. Umberto.
Yeah, I would have said 70-30. The physical infrastructure is required, yes, but it's a no-brainer. If you start with procedures, already you have better trade. Even if you have no infrastructure, if you just have one post at the border and you improve your procedures, all of a sudden you're going to improve your throughput. And so that, I think, should have the higher priority, 70-30. The biggest frustration from my perspective is that all the instruments exist to allow us to do it today. They're tried and tested UN instruments that allow us to harmonize all of our procedures at the borders, and they're not being put in place. And to go fully digital, and it's not in place. So in my perspective, it should be 70-30, but I'm at least glad that people do see that regulatory framework is more important.
Okay, so Ruslan Jeliazkov, a no-brainer.
Well, if there is only true question to answer, only one right answer, I would choose, of course, the regulatory framework, policies and approaches. But I think both are interconnected, so they're both sides of the coin. But the lack of infrastructure always a good excuse for lack of avoidance of regulatory framework, etc.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And Mehmet Cahit Serhan, what's your take on that figure?
Teşekkür ediyorum. Ben de Bulgar meslektaşıma katılıyorum.
I would like to agree with a Bulgarian colleague because it is essential to develop in a rapid manner, and it is essential to apply high-tech approaches. If we look at ongoing or planned projects, I suppose that it is essential for countries to facilitate regulatory frameworks as well. დიდი მადლობა და ნათია თურნავა, თქვენ რა სიტყოდით, როგორც ხედავთ აი ამ შედეგებიდან ფაქტობრივად თანაბრად მნიშვნელოვანია, ასევე ინფრასტრუქტურაც თქვა გამოწვევას წარმოადგენს ქვეყნისთვის, მაგრამ აღნიშნავდი, რომ მარეგულირებელი ჩარჩოც აუცილებელი, ასევე ურთიერთთავსებადობა და სათანადო პროცედურები უფრო მნიშვნელოვანია, ვიდრე ის, რომ გავაკეთოთ მხოლოდ ფიზიკური ინფრასტრუქტურა. და ახლა რამინ აგლი, თხოვთ თქვენ რას ფიქრობთ ამ Thank you very much. We utilize a complex approach because these regional components are interconnected. And we try to solve existing challenges.
Vladislav Kripke.
Yes, this time I won't talk about digital, of course. I will make the exception. I think this is, shows us two things. Some specific of the regional situation of the country, because of course, when we do talk about some policy, about framework in the country where does not exist the roads or only bumpy surface, they don't understand about the framework. They feel just like these hard problems very sensitive for them. So it's the signal that the business, the citizens, they believe only when the state creates conditions. So both elements are very needed. That's my answer.
Thank you very much. And finally, I'd like to get the response of Yamiyari to those figures. Quite surprising the way they shifted in the course of our discussion.
Well, I think the answer to the question to a large extent is within the theme of the forum and the name itself, the Silk Road. If you look at history, for hundreds of years, people and goods were moving across continents. My country being right in the middle of this, you have remainings of ancient Silk Road that contributed to many cultures. Chinese cultures, we saw effect in Turkey, for example. It moved from China to Afghanistan. A good example of that is the miniature paintings. There's a very good book by a very famous on this. It kind of lays the history. So at those times, the administrative borders and so on and so forth were not as solid as they are now. The countries or regions were less bureaucratic. So in a way, we actually created these issues. At those times, you can imagine there weren't a lot of infrastructure in place. But as our colleague said here, people were trading for thousands of years with less bureaucracy, perhaps. I think the answer is clear. We need to remove some of these administrative barriers.
Thank you. I think the word that we're looking for here is digitization, and that's certainly the dominant theme which has come out at me, along with quite a few other themes as well. The point that was raised at the beginning of our discussion, in fact, about the idea of countries looking within themselves to tackle their own infrastructure issues, and once you've done that, it strengthens your hand in terms of reaching out and working with other countries, particularly where there may be tensions, existing border tensions, but at least with this connectivity where everybody stands to gain, it is possible to conquer these difficulties. But there also has to be a willingness, a political willingness for governments perhaps to, whatever trepidation they may have in terms of working with businesses, they need to reach out and bind together on this, because ultimately it is the citizen who will gain. When businesses prosper, that prosperity, if you believe in trickle-down economics, it should feed through to the rest of us. And we are in a phase of globalization, and once upon a time when we talked about economies connecting, working together, I'm big enough, old enough and ugly enough to remember, unfortunately, a time when transport never really featured. But the world has changed, and the discussion points are changing with it. And we can see certainly how countries are working together in the connectivity field, the huge strides which are being taken from our host, for example, Georgia, and the obvious pride which they take in this. It's an example to everybody and something from which everybody can actually borrow and learn. So ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I would like to thank you for giving us your time. Apologies that we started a little bit late, but thank you for staying the course with us. And also, thank you for the vote. It was very interesting in the way how it changed, and hopefully the many issues which came up in response to that vote will continue when we leave the hall. But can you please just really shower our panel with your applause, because they have been absolutely magnificent. Thank you so much. And I can say that as somebody who isn't a minister or a road expert in any way, shape or form, I feel that I have learnt so much today. So thank you, all of you. And all I would say is please have a wonderful evening and enjoy the rest of the Silk Road Forum. Thank you.